saves it also to a disk that you can put in your hard drive, put in your computer. Yeah.
I should have known something like that was out there, but just
I didn't know about it either.
new generation, old battle. That's so true. Good morning, Baton Rouge and surrounding areas. Thank you so much for tuning in to What's Going On every Tuesday and Thursday mornings, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. right here on WTQT-FM 106.1. What's Going On? My name is Dr. James Gilmore, and we're here every Tuesday and Thursday morning to talk about what's going on in our community, right here in our own backyard, what's going on across the state, the nation, and the world. Again, thank you so much for tuning in to What's Going On. Today's topic is something that is something I thought I'd never ever live. I was telling a friend the other day that I feel like I'm living a life surrounded by things I read about in history books as a child. The fights for justice, the fights for equality, the police brutality. These are things that as a child and I read about in books that happened way back then are now a reality in my life and the life of other Americans, particularly Black Americans. Every day we see and hear about what's going on as it relates to police violence, brutality, and murder by bad cops. And so today's show, we're going to talk about what's going on as it relates to so much police violence happening in our country. I've been watching an attorney via social media fight so hard and accept cases that, in the name of justice, to fight on behalf of families because the victims are no longer here. And I began to admire the work of this attorney, and I'm so privileged that attorney Ronald Haley accepted my invitation to come in today to talk about what's going on as it relates to police violence and the victims of police violence. And so, Mr. Haley, thank you so much for coming in onto the show this morning.
No, the pleasure is all mine, Doc. The pleasure is all mine. Thank you for having me.
Great. So first, just for my listening audience on 106.1 as well as on Facebook, introduce yourself. Let folks know who Ronald Haley is, a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been practicing law for about 13 years. My office is here locally in Baton Rouge, 8211 Goodwood Boulevard. Mm-hmm. We focus mainly on criminal defense, civil rights, and family law.
Okay.
Civil rights has always been a passion of mine. Mm-hmm. If I imagine where I was going to be as a lawyer at this point in my life, I'm where I believed I was going to be. Mm-hmm. Didn't know how I was going to get there. There were bumps in the roads like there are anywhere in life. Mm-hmm. But I believe I'm here at this moment, to help our people.
Well, and you're absolutely doing that, Attorney Haley. I must say, you're absolutely helping our people. I don't see many like you in our community fighting for civil rights and justice, especially at such a young age. I'm not going to ask you age. You look like you're in your 20s. And so, again, I appreciate you coming on to the show to talk about these fights for justice, and it's multiple fights. It's not just one. Tell the listening audience just a few of the cases that you're working on right now, so that folks can maybe recognize some of the people and families that you are representing.
It's a shame that it's so many.
Yes, it's a lot.
Someone asked me in an interview, what would you like to see change in the next 5 years? I said that I hope my civil rights practice is shut down because folks don't need lawyers like me to defend them, because change has actually happened. Mm-hmm. That's what would make me happy. But just to run off a few, we represent currently right now the Trayford Pellerin family. We represent Joseph Richardson's family. We represent Modesto Reyes' family. In New Orleans, we represent Tramal McGee, which is a 14-year-old child that was shot in the back by JPSO. Fortunately, he survived. Mm-hmm. We represent the Celestine twins in Lafayette, which is a case that went viral for them getting beat up at a bowling alley for no apparent reason.
I remember that.
We have the St. Landry case that just happened, where an inmate was beaten up by 2 guards, and those guards were arrested, which is news in my book because typically you don't see that happen. Mm-hmm. I represent the family of Ronald Green with Attorney Lee Merritt in Union Parish, Louisiana. That's just a name.
Just a few. Too many. And those are mostly right here in Louisiana.
Yes.
So this is in Louisiana. You represent that many people and families that have faced some type of abuse or violence at the hands of the state, at the hands of officers.
So we've all seen the COVID maps, right? Mm-hmm. Anybody that's watched CNN, MSNBC, has seen the maps of a hotbed. To give an example, if we talk about this thing called injustice, systematic racism in policing, and this is like a COVID map, mm-hmm. Louisiana would be red.
Wow. We're a hot spot.
It would be a hot spot. And I'm not just saying that because of the cases I have. I'm talking to national civil rights lawyers who also come down here and fight these cases, sometimes with me, sometimes on their own. And these are some of their words that they told me, like, mm-hmm. Louisiana's different.
So here's the first big question is why? Why is Louisiana a hot spot, and why is there so many cases where officers who are sworn to protect and serve us citizens, we as citizens, why are we a hotbed in Louisiana for so much police violence and abuse and murder?
I think you can answer that question one of 2 ways. One, you can look at in general, which we see in national trends. The lack of transparency is the first thing. Transparency mm-hmm. is the floor of what we should expect from our law enforcement communities. The fact that many of the sheriff's offices do not have body cams. Mm-hmm. A number of city police officers do not have body cams. That's a big part of it. The fact that you don't have that camera on you to watch and to record the potential transgressors that are out there. I think the second thing is the lack of accountability. That even when in the face of obvious wrongdoing, that a lot of times these officers don't even get their day in the court system.
Right.
That it dies at the grand jury. It dies with prosecutorial discretion not to prosecute or to pass the buck off to the Department of Justice, to pass the buck off to the Attorney General's office. So I think that it emboldens behavior. Look at what happened with Mr. Ronald Green. The fact they were so bold. Doc, listen to this. This man, they had the audacity to tell his family that he died in a car accident. In a car accident. And we've seen the pictures that it was a fender bender. It is, they didn't even try to mess the car up. It was like, you know what? We just so used to this stuff that we're just going to say whatever we want and it's going to go.
And we're going to write down whatever we want in the police report, and folks are going to sign off on it and put it in the box. So tell me this, with the case of Mr. Ronald Green, and again, I understand that, you know, this litigation is ongoing, so I respect the fact that what you can't say and what you can say. Why did it take so long? It's been a year that accident happened, right? That man.
17 months.
So over a year. Why we as the public, me and others, why are we just hearing about this case? Why wasn't there more of an investigation at that time? Are we speaking cover up maybe? I mean, why did that happen? Why didn't his family get more answers at that time?
I think it's obvious cover up. I can go on record and say that. Anytime you absolutely lie to the family and said that this man died from injuries of a car accident, when it's plainly obvious, objectively obvious, not subjective, objectively obvious.
And the pictures. We've seen the pictures on social media.
That didn't happen.
That he had more, so many bruises and contusions and things. So it was far more than the accident that we saw.
Yes.
You talked about the lack of body cameras. Do you think that many of our sheriff departments and local police departments, and I must applaud Baton Rouge because, you know, we started a pilot a few years ago, and now I believe that the Mayor Broome has outfitted all officers with cameras. But do you think that for these other communities where they don't have body cams, do you think it's a choice, or do you think it's a budget matter?
It's a choice.
It's a choice.
It's a choice.
It's a choice.
And listen, I don't.
So how do we mandate? We need to mandate.
It needs to be mandated.
Absolutely.
Listen, actually, I don't care what the costs are.
Right.
If part of your job description, the only job in this country where you can legally take away somebody's life, legally take away somebody's liberty, legally take away someone's property under the color of law, you have to be transparent with that power. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you know what? The good officers should want there to be transparency, so that there's no question that they were acting appropriately under the color of law. So I don't care what the costs are.
Right.
It has to happen.
Yep. And I say cost because oftentimes in the work that I do, I've heard that be a topic. We can't afford to outfit people. So
figure it out. Figure out other things. They can figure that out.
Yep. Tell us about these lack of accountability, because even here in our community, I know that though officers are required to have body cameras, unless there have been some changes over the past couple of years, there's really lack of accountability as it relates to what happens if those cameras are turned off, what happens if those cameras aren't on. How do we hold our officers and our departments accountable for not just having the cameras, but also disciplinary action if they're not used?
So I want to applaud Chief Paul in this instance. One thing that he did learn and get right is that whenever there is a critical incident involving one of his officers, that information is coming out pretty fast.
Yes.
Within, I think 48 to 72 hours.
Right.
He gets applaud for that because you don't see that in a lot of jurisdictions across the state. I think number one, if there's a critical incident involving an officer, critical incident meaning either an allegation of severe excessive force or a firearm just used, that within 48 hours of a request that information needs to be out. That's the first part. Because in the Ronald Green case, there's body cams. In the Trayford Pellerin case, there's body cams.
Yeah, I was about to say
they're body cams. In the case with the Celestine twins, there are body cams, but nobody's seen them. the public has not seen them. That it's not just about having them, but also when there is a critical incident, that information is released to the public.
So do we need a law to force them to release the body cameras, or is there a law that protects them from releasing the body cameras? Because, what we as the public hear is the body cameras are not going to be released because it's pending an investigation. Everything is pending an investigation, which the investigation can't be tainted. And so why aren't body cam footages released immediately? Why are there some that take days, some that take weeks, some that take years? And Mr. Trayford, there was a battle to even get, and those still haven't been released, correct?
Correct. Listen, it doesn't take a rocket scientist or legal scholar to figure out the reason why. It's the suppression of the truth. For whatever reason, whether you're gonna hide behind the privacy of the officers that are involved, whether it's public safety, fear of public unrest, embarrassment, I don't know.
You've heard it all because the public. We've heard all of those excuses.
But it is the most objective piece of evidence that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about tainting an investigation, how is the most objective evidence that we have that if the body cams are properly working, recording what they're supposed to do,
mm-hmm.
that how does that somehow taint an investigation?
Yes.
It's not subjective. It's
right.
not subjective. It's
right.
not as if, you know what, I'm going to get your statement today,
right.
Doc, and then I'm going to go back and try to get it 2 weeks from now, and then after you done talk to 55 million people, you come back and your story may change,
mm-hmm.
Or your perspective of something
right.
may change. It is objective evidence.
The footage doesn't change.
It's objective evidence.
Mm-hmm. So what's the latest in Mr. Trayford Pellerin's case? I know there was some debate and some challenges with the mayor. I think some of that you and your leadership and your team have been able to make some progress with the mayor in Lafayette at getting information. Where are we with that particular case? I know you have many, but where are we with that case in your fight for justice for the family? And if you don't know, this is the for listening audience, this is the Shell station, correct?
Yes.
An incident is an easy word, but a man was murdered there. Give us the latest and what's happening with that case.
Well, the mayor's office has come around and they've worked with us to help win that hearing. Technically, the TRO was dismissed, but that paved the way for the family to be able to view the footage. A meeting was set up. The family, I think it came out in the news last week that the family was able to see it.
Mm-hmm.
I can confirm that. I can't speak to what was
right,
on there,
right.
but yes, we were able to see some of that footage
mm-hmm.
that
mm-hmm.
of Mr. Pellerin's passing.
So, do we need our legislators to go to the state legislature and mandate that footage be released?
That footage and all footage. Listen, 48 hours within a critical incident, the objective footage needs to be released.
Okay, so
Straight
legislators.
It has to. Secondly, I like what you said, Doc, about there needs to be penalties if these body cams aren't functioning, not working, turned off on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it needs to necessarily go to the level of criminal penalties because sometimes things malfunction, but I do think there needs to be changes in the law that there will be certain presumptions if this
right.
evidence isn't there. So, for instance, if there's a stop on the side of the road and there's an issue whether or not a person gave consent and that consent isn't on camera because the camera's turned off, the volume is down, that there needs to be a presumption under the law that benefits the accused
Absolutely.
when that evidence isn't there. So it just can't be the convenience of this evidence being turned off.
Right. Another case that I watched you on the BBC. You and another Joe Porter. He was in the studio maybe about 2 weeks ago. He talked a lot. He didn't talk anything about that. So I was shocked when I also saw him in the interview with the BBC. Witnesses. Oh my God. Witnesses. We all sympathize and we hurt and we march for justice for those who are victims of police violence. But that BBC special really gave me an awakening to think about those people who were there by their side doing this or who witnessed it. How are the witnesses based on this BBC? And I'd like for you to talk about the BBC documentary. For those of you all that didn't see it, please visit my Facebook page or Joe Porter's Facebook page or Mr. Ronald Haley's page and others to watch this. who takes care of our witnesses? Who protects them? Because it appears as if our rogue cops in many of these departments, they too victimize witnesses.
Listen, I'm going to use a quote from my good friend, colleague, and partner on many of these cases, Diedrich Moore, whenever we go speak at a protest. And listen, we believe this, that if you're going to allow me to talk for you in the courtroom, I need to be able to walk for you in these streets and speak for you in these streets. And so we have gone to protest, from here to Philadelphia, in the name of justice. And what he says when we get a case, he said he always harps on the fact that the community needs to wrap their arms around these witnesses out there to make sure they're not intimidated, to know that not just like we have these families, we have y'all too, because without the witnesses, if we're just going to depend upon a quote-unquote independent investigation, we know how it's going to come out. We need them to be diligent. We need them to be involved. So many times I've talked to witnesses that only want to go off the record, that could help put a little piece of a puzzle together, but does not want to go on out of fear of retribution, fear of charges being placed on them, fear of, if they have current charges, being dealt with in a different way than they would. These are legitimate problems that people have. The constant knockings at the door, it's nerve-wracking. And so absolutely that we need, what can we do? I think there needs to be protections under the law for witnesses, in particular similar to whistleblower protections. If you're going to be a witness in a police an excessive force case involving the police officers, they need the same protection as whistleblowers do in
corporate America.
They do. But the community, but it also starts with the community. Record what's going on. Make sure Mr. James, who saw that bad incident, is insulated with the community, that you're going to have his back, that you're not going to allow him to get bullied, that you're not going to allow him to get intimidated, that you make sure that he's engaged. Yes.
Because the witnesses, they don't want to leave the community, plus they need to be there to testify. What I saw interesting about the BBC documentary as it relates to Joseph Richardson, and then I thought about Breonna Taylor, was how the charges that were brought up against the young lady, and how she's having to deal with those charges, is traumatic to her, because she's stuck with the murder of her her boyfriend, or Joseph Richardson, and being a witness to it, but yet having all of these. It's almost like having all these charges over her head. She was terrified and traumatic, because and from what I read, the brother that witnessed the murder of Breonna Taylor when they were in the same bedroom together, he too was offered a plea bargain and wanted to place charges on Breonna and say, I read that she was a member of a cartel or something,
crazy.
Something crazy. This is intimidation. This makes witnesses not want to testify.
No.
And how do we stop it though? Or how do we eradicate these rogue, bad cops out of our police department? Because people are saying defund the police department. That's a big trend around the country now. Okay, is it reform? Is it defund? But it's obvious that the police departments are the KKK in many of our communities.
We need to reimagine what policing is in this country and in this community. I don't have the exact answer for what that looks like, but I do think we're coming to a reckoning right now, and that everyone needs to look each other in the eye, and everyone needs to look at themselves in the mirror and see what we can do to do better. But again, it starts, I pound the pavement of this, and I'm going to pound it until I can't pound no more. It starts with transparency and accountability. Those things should be the floor of what we expect from anyone whose job description is to take your life, liberty, and property. And there should be nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with the truth, and that's been probably the most frustrating thing in a lot of these fights. Look at Trayford's case, any pushback that we got on Trayford. I'm like, look, we just want the truth. However it comes out, good, bad, or indifferent, whether there's gray area, and life is about gray areas, but let that come out and let the people decide. But too often, people hide from that, and then it makes it hard to digest when it comes out. And that's not fair to the families, but that's also not fair to the police.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't, because let's look at Trayford's case. Hypothetically speaking, it takes another 6 months for them to finish their investigation. Let's say the rules of the officers were wrong, that it was not a justifiable shoot. You're going to have a segment of the community that will say that it was the public pressure from the protesters, from the marches, from lawyers going on television and radio stations all the time talking about it, that they caved to the pressure, and that's why charges are brought. Consequently, the other way, if it takes 6 months for it to come out, and like many of these cases, the Friday afternoon news dump, and they say that no charges are going to be brought,
Mm-hmm.
then folks are going to say on the other side that the books were cooked.
Mm-hmm.
As in Ms. Taylor's case,
Mm-hmm.
as they're trying to do in the Ronald Green's case.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's not fair. That's not fair to the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's maddening to
And
me.
the people need to get mad. Really, the people need to get mad, and we need to hold our elected officials accountable. And in those areas where you do not elect your chief of police or your sheriff, they need to be elected, and we need to vote these people out.
And district attorneys as well.
And I was about to ask you, what role do DAs play in permeating this culture of lack of accountability for officers?
Well, I mean, it's the pass the buck mentality. You rarely see a district attorney, and this is not to single out anyone,
Mm-hmm.
just across the state. Typically, you have a critical incident involving the police. The first thing they do is to recuse themselves and punt it to the Louisiana Department of Justice, or punt it to the Department of Justice. What I think should be a solution to that is, I think each district attorney needs to have a separate office that's insulated from them. That's not there. Those DAs aren't going to go in there and try cases and associate themselves with officers that they're going to have to then potentially look to prosecute.
Right.
That just a completely different wing in their office that just deals with these excessive force cases,
Right.
and investigate them. Because I don't think these things should be punted to the Attorney General's office.
Right.
I don't think these things should be punted to the Department of Justice. And let me tell you why. When we talk about transparency and accountability, you see, when you talk about a Baton Rouge case, or West Baton Rouge case, or Livingston Parish case, or Clinton case, look, we know that the Attorney General's office here is centralized. It's a golf shot away. It's right there. You can see the building from the interstate.
Mm-hmm.
But look at a case in Shreveport, or in Union Parish, or in Monroe, or in Alexandria, where we have such distance between. That's what takes away the accountability. No, those don't punt the case to this mythical figure down in Baton Rouge to go and investigate.
Right.
Have it done on your own, so then your people could hold you accountable.
Mm-hmm.
That if you're not holding these officers accountable,
Right.
then they could make that an election issue.
I think that's being a coward when a DA kicks the case to Attorney General elsewhere. I think that, or it already shows that there is some type of that they're too cozy already, and that's a problem.
And and practically speaking, I can understand why they're cozy, because listen, most cases come in with the sheriff, police department, state police. The file goes to the DA. Those DAs are working hand in hand with those that are investigating it.
So
I get that, but that's why you need to get a separate wing.
I like that solution.
And they do it. They have violent crime units.
Mm-hmm.
They have sex crime units.
They just need a police investigatory unit.
Yes. And those prosecutors will never step into court to try a case against a citizen defendant. Their job is just to do that. That's when we talk about transparency. That's when we talk about accountability. And Doc, that's not hard to do.
No, it's not.
Nothing I'm talking about is something that takes an act of Congress to pull off.
Right.
These are systematic policy changes that can happen.
If
they it can happen tomorrow.
If they want to do it. Unions, police unions. Do they play a role in creating this culture of lack of accountability and lack of disciplinary action taken against officers who are violent towards innocent citizens?
Absolutely. Many times the police unions or sheriff's office associations have their individual sheriff's office or police department on lock. That oftentimes they make it very, very difficult.
Campaign contributions to help them get elected.
They make it very, very difficult
Uh-huh.
on them to discipline their officers.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the Police Officers Bill of Rights. Do I think police need to be protected? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Do I think the Police Officers Bill of Rights overreaches? Absolutely. As well. And that's the direct result of the tragedy that happened when those officers were killed on their line. There was a lot of momentum going towards getting change, and all that went away when lone gunman came down here and wrongfully
murdered our officers.
Absolute travesty.
Mm-hmm.
But then that led to sometimes when something happens that shocks the conscience,
Mm-hmm.
it leads to overreach, and
Right.
I think that Bill of Rights was an absolute overreach because we already had laws on the books already designating and protecting officers. We had crimes such as battery on a police officer.
Right.
It already is first degree murder if you shoot one officer.
Right, because when I heard about the Blue Lives Matter bill, I said our officers don't already have such protections.
And what they made it possible, you look at a rogue officer like Yusef Hamideh, who lied on Brother Raheem Howard.
Didn't he say he shot it? That the brother shot at him, and the only case shellings were found was his.
Right, proven to be liar, and we're not going to get into why he wasn't prosecuted or not, but just in the fact that it was, I'm going to use my, grandfather's term, Lord rest his soul, a rigmarole, the old school term there, to try to get him out of there.
Right.
I mean, you remember that? I mean, that was an issue in the news for about 5 months.
Yeah.
He's fired. Then there's the appeal. Then there's something with the polygraph test.
Right.
Then there's this loophole. Then we're going to go back to the board. Then the board recommends this. Then, why does it take that long to fire somebody that lied?
Because
you
in the private sector, okay, I'm in HR. I've been doing HR for about 20 years, and I've terminated people that lied on their job applications that were employed for a couple of years. And something on their job application was a lie that we found out, and you were out the door. Here are people that lie on the police force, and it takes months of if the department actually disciplines them and let's say terminates them, they appeal, they go before the Civil Service Commission, they still getting paid, they may be brought back to work, and what this does is this lets the bad road cops, this empowers them to believe that they can continue to do what they do and not have any consequences.
No, because the consequences are on the taxpayer. It's not coming out the police union budget. It's not coming out the police budget. It's coming out the taxpayer budget.
Right.
Look, I don't know about you, but if I made a $12 million mistake, like they did in Kentucky, that me and everybody else that made that $12 million mistake
will be out of a job.
Will be out of a job. And that's not the case. And let me tell you what was disturbing to me about the Taylor decision, or indecision, let me call it. They gave that family some blood money 2 weeks before. And this is why we got to be diligent and not be bamboozled. And I'm not trying to say the settlement based on trends nationwide wasn't a good number. It was. But you know what happened? They knew what was about to happen 2 weeks later. In the way they were going to construct that grand jury. And the way that they were going to, look, the prosecutor once told me you can indict a ham sandwich. You could choose to indict or not indict based on how you present that evidence. But by giving that settlement before, you know what they did? They stripped the civil attorneys of their subpoena power.
Wow.
Because the case is settled. It's over. And so unless somehow the grand jury proceedings gets unsealed, which based on what's going on there,
working on that right now.
They're trying to.
Yeah.
But from a civil standpoint, let's say what happened, but yet you can still go into court. You can still file for discovery. You can put those officers under cross-examination through depositions, and you still may settle the case. But at least you could start to get some semblance of the truth as far as what happened. You don't even have the power to do that now because they didn't give this money on the front end.
Wow.
Now, this is not saying anybody was in on it on the Taylor side, not at all. And I think the lawyers did a great job of getting a great settlement for the family. But there was an idea of hope was coming.
For disciplinary injustice.
Just that, okay, look, the city's going to do the right thing, and they're going to give this money, and then now we're going to move on to the next thing.
Right.
When I saw that, I was like, there's something to that. By them getting this out the way.
And it came.
And it came.
It came. Yeah, here in Baton Rouge, I believe, we have a year-to-year contract with the union, and I must say, the public, we're not satisfied with what's happened. Not only with with the Sterling case. Okay, we have a city council that, as of yet, hasn't settled, but there still hasn't been any justice, and we still had an officer that killed him that got paid. I don't think the people are going to tolerate this much longer. I think there'll be much unrest unless there's some resolution. And so I want to really send a message out to those that have the power to do what's right, create the accountability, and create the transparency. Do so, because it's not just a tagline. When there's no justice, there'll be no peace. And I think that many of us, not only do we want peace, we want justice also.
Yeah, but if they want us to trust them, they have to trust.
Officers.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
they have to trust us as well.
Mm-hmm.
Elected officials, you want us to trust you. You have to trust us as well. And here's what I mean by that: trust the fact that the people can handle the truth. That you don't have to suppress it.
Mm-hmm.
That it's okay to release this. Don't worry about civil unrest and
Right.
places burning down. You know when it really gets hot, and when things get to a boiling point, when people think they're getting played with.
Yes.
Or played.
Yes. People will respect you a little bit more if you came with the truth.
You come out with the truth. Look, this person got 48 hours. Here's the shooting.
Mm-hmm.
The officers on leave. It is under investigation. And guess what? Just by giving the people that, they will give you the time to do your investigation if they feel like they're not getting played with.
Right.
But when you got folks in the dark, and all we get is transparency from Good Samaritans who are taking, video of these things, and those videos gets leaked to social media, and then it goes viral. Is the only way to get transparency. That's what aggravates people. That's what gets people's bloods boiling.
Yep.
That's what gets people
over
into the streets
over
and over. We see the same movie.
Yep. We got to march to get tapes released. We gotta we gotta
just for that.
Just for that.
Just
we gotta march
for that.
Just to get tapes released.
We're not even talking about a prosecution or firing. Just to get the truth out.
Right. Let's talk about what's going on with what happened in Lafayette. What happened? Were there any? Give us the story. What you know and what you can say. How did he end up across the street? How did he end up? What happened there with Mr. Pelham?
We believe that Mr. Pellerin was having a mental health episode, and that's something that's
we aren't dealing with in our society
with
at
our
all.
society. We have to do better about taking care of those who have a mental health crisis or an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's incumbent upon, when we talk about reimagining our police department, that's one of the things, that you get a call in that somebody is allegedly tripping or acting a certain type of way. Don't assume that somebody is drugged out, drunked out, zoned out.
Or carrying a weapon.
But assume that call is coming in, that it also can be, if somebody can't articulate a particular crime that is happening, or that person's particularly doing something to somebody that would amount to a crime, assume that it may be a mental health issue and treat that accordingly. We believe that our client, rest his soul, may have been having one of those issues. We know that just from some of his history, that could have, been the case.
Mm-hmm.
But what we do know is that he was walking away. Walking away isn't a threat. What we do know is that there wasn't an individual person that he ever threatened in the walk from the 1 Circle K over to the Shell gas station. And we do know that they could have done more to de-escalate the situation.
Mm-hmm.
That it did not have to go from 0 to 50 to 100 before they shot and killed him with so many bullets.
How many bullets do you all know?
We know approximately 16 shots. 10 hit him. We know, and we got that because we had to get an independent autopsy on Mr. Pellerin because we weren't getting any information.
16 shots to a man that didn't have a weapon.
There wasn't a threat.
That wasn't a threat.
To anyone but himself. And we've seen it work in other communities. And what's frustrating the folks at Lafayette is that there was an incident 3 weeks before, on August the 5th, with a older white gentleman by the name of Ronald Haley, who basically, I believe, from what I read, and again, I'm not a psychologist, but appears to be having some mental health problems, barricaded himself in a car with a machete, and they shut down the thruway until they talked him down, got him out without a problem, and was able to make a $7,500 bond.
And we've seen this happen so many times on social media, and thank God for video cameras, because even though we still aren't getting the justice all the time, but at least the people can see it and demand justice. But we've seen so many times where white males or white females who are having mental episodes or who are acting irrational and who may or may not even have a weapon, how the officers tend to be so patient. For some reason, they always find their taser for white folk, but they find their guns for black folk. And, you know, they find their mace for white folks. They find their guns for black folks. And so I'm not sure, you know, why that is that an officer grabs his gun for black people, but grabs his mace and taser most often for whites. But we've seen the videos. I've seen the videos where this happened, and white people are given minutes and minutes and minutes to calm down and de-escalate and bring in social workers. Whereas oftentimes these videos shows blacks being murdered.
That's true. And this is not to say that we want, you know, our white brothers and sisters to get murdered.
Absolutely.
We just want the same thing for
Absolutely.
us. Have the same de-escalation, have the same patience. You know, try to talk, you know, you don't need to be retrained.
Right.
Because we see in certain areas of town, training is absolutely fine. We just want the same treatment applied on the other side of town.
Right, right. And so I know here in Baton Rouge, another area where Mayor Broome, as well as Chief Chief Murphy Paul, should be congratulated, is where they did a lot of training and de-escalation techniques as well as policies for our Baton Rouge Police Department. And this is something that Mayor Broome did immediately when she took office, and something that we can be proud of. In the other places, and you have multiple cases around the state, do those departments carry such policies as it relates to, and training as it relates to de-escalation techniques and what steps must be taken before guns are drawn?
In principle, yes.
In principle.
But what we've found is that it's not uniform across the state. Okay? So what BRPD does may not be what Jefferson Parish does, may not be what West Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office does. And we know that there should be some cultural nuances based on where you're at. But I do think we need a more standardized system that all are trained the same way, because all of them still have the right, again, to take away your life, liberty, and property.
Absolutely.
And so you shouldn't be trained one way in Baton Rouge
Right.
and trained another way in Winfield, Louisiana.
Right.
I don't care how big or small the department is. That we need
or what their budget is.
that we need a centralized training standard that all will be held accountable for. There should be just one manual as it relates to excessive force, use of deadly force, and de-escalation.
Right.
That they all use and should be held to that standard. I mean, because the thing about, and to those that may not understand, let's break it down like this. If you have a job over here in one particular city that is the same job that I have in another city, same thing, same job description, shouldn't you be trained the same way?
Right. You're an engineer for Exxon, whether you're in Houston or whether you're here at the Baton Rouge facility.
You should be trained the same way,
Right.
and held to the same standards.
Right, right.
But that's
Doesn't
not what we're
apply
seeing
in our police departments.
No.
I'm taking notes about these solutions. One thing we do on this show is we talk about the problems and we talk about the issues, but I also like to get out the solutions. And I must say, you're giving some great solutions to this police violence issue we're having. Let's talk about how these bad cops do get disciplined, do get fired, and then pick up jobs in other communities.
Well,
Have you experienced that in any of the cases
Oh,
that
yes.
you've experienced?
Yes,
where
with-
these cops are not new.
so
These
that's
cops are not new to violence. They did violence elsewhere.
look, that's a part of the movie. The movie that we're trying to write a different script on,
Mhm.
to have a different ending,
Mhm.
that's all a part of the movie. That's all.
Mhm.
That's a part of the subplot.
Mhm.
What happens is you go through discipline, and then months and months down the road, there is an agreement for that officer to resign. Oftentimes, getting their back pay if they were suspended without pay,
Mm-hmm.
and because they don't have that mark
Getting back pay.
mark on their record, they have the
Who
ability.
gets back pay after being terminated? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
They get to go and reapply in another neighboring town, in another neighboring city, because they did not have a bad
The
termination.
documentation
Right.
wasn't there.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and they're able to go right in
Yeah.
and keep on doing what they were doing.
Or what we've done in HR, me too, is say, hey, look, if you just resign, this won't go on your record.
Correct. You
Okay.
can't do that in policing. You can't.
You can't.
You can't. And not when, again, your job description, I'm sorry for keep on saying it over and over again, but folks need to talk about it within these terms. Their job description gives them the opportunity to take away your life,
Right.
your liberty, or your property.
Mm-hmm.
Under the color of law, you got to be held to a higher standard.
Got to be held to a higher standard. So where do we go from here? Or where are you headed in your quest for justice for all of these families and all of these victims? You have a lot of fights on your hands.
We have a lot of fights, but fortunately,
And again, I've only talked about the two here. Are there any other cases that you're working on, be it the twins or other things that you want to highlight here that may have a different perspective than these two as it relates to what our people are experiencing? And when I say our people, I mean Americans.
well, it's
Are
Americans.
experiencing with this police violence trend.
We have 3 or 4 white clients or families that have been victim of police violence.
Right.
So it is not just a black or brown issue.
Mhm.
Just the problem is like COVID, it just affects us at a much higher rate.
Mhm.
But injustice does happen in those communities as well.
And I want to highlight that there are white Americans who are victims of, innocent white Americans who are victims of police violence. And also, as someone posted on Facebook, even if you're guilty, you don't deserve to be murdered.
Or
you
maimed
deserve a
or
chance.
beaten.
Or beaten.
Listen, nowhere in the criminal code says that if you flee, you get a butt whipping in 6 months. No, it's 6 months.
Right.
That's what you get. Nowhere in the code says that if you have some drugs on you, that becomes a death sentence. No, it's 5 to 10 depending upon what
It's in the criminal code.
Right. So there are penalties for what these things are, and none of those penalties means you're maimed, you're beaten, or killed.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't. And so I just look to there. It's
Allow Americans in this democracy to get their chance in court,
yes.
and let the criminal code dictate their punishment if found guilty.
Right. Do not be judge, jury, and executioner with a badge. Do not do that. But
Officers, say that one more time for me, please. For our officers.
do not be judge, jury, and executioner with a badge.
Please, officers. I want to thank you so much for joining my show today.
No, Doc, thank you for having me.
We talked about a lot of things as it relates to police violence. We talked about solutions as it relates to how do we protect our witnesses. How do we bring about increased transparency? Every officer in this state, regardless of how small your town budget is or how large it is, should have a body camera. There should come accountabilities for wearing those body cameras and keeping them on. They need to be released. The video needs to be released within 48 hours to our legislators. We may need you to go back in, and just as you passed the Blue Lives Matter bill, let's pass a bill that releases these tapes, these body cams, within 48 hours, because victims' lives matter too. We need whistleblower protections. Our witnesses should not be scared and traumatized and harassed by our officers. So we need increased witness protection, very similar to the whistleblower protections we give to corporate America. And we need to find ways to ensure that bad cops don't get jobs elsewhere. Again, I want to thank you, brother.
No, I appreciate
for
you.
your fight, Ronald Haley. I want to thank you for your fight for justice, for all that you do in civil rights, and to the families that you represent. Sending prayers to them as well as to you and your family, because this is tough work. And I just want to let you know that we appreciate what you do.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to What's Going On every Tuesday and Thursday morning, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. right here on WTQT 106.1 FM. We have a lot going on over the next several shows. Thank you, Mayor Broom, for confirming to be on my show. So Mayor Broom will be on my show in the next couple of weeks, as well as many other candidates seeking office. Unfortunately, all spots have been taken. So for the past month, I've been having those who are running for office come in and talk about their platforms. And I thank you all for the overwhelming response. And so now until November 3rd, we're packed with candidates. So please tune in and listen. And let's talk about these issues that Brother Attorney Ronald Haley and I have talked about today as it relates to holding police accountable. And let's not forget that we have lots of good cops out there. A lot of great cops out there. It's just unfortunately the bad cops give good cops a bad name. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.